All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Center for Online and Continuing Education at FAU. Today's professional development webinar is on project-based learning in your online course. My name is Kathy Taliau, and I'll be presenting today. So our objectives for today are to discuss the benefits of project-based learning, and we also want to explore strategies for implementing project-based learning in higher education, distance learning environment. The question that we had up at the beginning was to think about what were the things that you remember most vividly in terms of learning, and also what questions do you have about projects and online courses before we get started. Okay. For myself, it was application, probably working on the high school newspaper. We had to produce every week a newspaper, a product that we worked together on. We used technology, what we had at the time. We actually went to the local town, local newspaper and printed it out using the blue graph paper and photos that we developed in our own photography studio. And yeah, it was terrific, really great experience. We certainly learned about processes, and we had to do a lot of problem solving as well. Does anybody else want to share at this point?
I'll share.
Sure.
So as I mentioned in the chat, I really struggled in middle school and high school. I found it very difficult to make connections, bridging the new knowledge with my current knowledge. And I didn't do well. I didn't really have a lot of the opportunities to, as you're saying, apply, to really perform and self-assess. There just really wasn't a lot of that. And I think I know I would have done much better in middle school and high school had I the opportunity to, experiment and really show that I know in different ways.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, it's even the negative. I remember my 8th grade fruit fly experiment. My partner and I, one of the little flies got caught in the potato mush, and we kept trying to tip the vial to make them untrap them, and it ended up being the great fruit fly disaster. They all died. It was terrible, but there's all kinds of problem solving that comes up and things that you learn even though you're making mistakes. It's really important. Okay, so let's go ahead. The project-based learning definition that we're going to use today comes from this terrific website called pblworks.org. Thanks, Dr. Judy, for recommending it to us. And they define it as a teaching method in which students learn by actively engaging in real-world and personally meaningful projects. And it's the best I could come up with. You can't do any better than that. The doctors that created this model, let me see, get their names up here. Larmer and Mergendaler. They came up with the 8 essentials of project-based learning. We're going to go quickly through a shortened version of those 8 elements, and then I'm going to show you some examples that we have from professors that I've worked with at FAU. So the first one is the students need a strong why. They really need a meaningful reason to do the project. And high stakes grading is not it. I've heard professors say, well, they have to do it because it counts for 75% of their grade. That is not a high motivator. It's something that instills fear, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how is this useful in the real world? And we also want to make sure that it fulfills a significant educational purpose, which means does it align with the standards and the objectives of your course? And we'll see what that looks like in a minute. And it makes sense, how important is it? Why should I care about this? Doesn't matter how old you are, So the second element is to give students a choice and a voice. giving learners the ability to choose topics, areas of research, to ask their own questions, to do some of their own problem solving, and then a voice to ask questions and to complain even when things aren't going well, to have ideas about which direction should we go in. All of that increase their interest, and it gives them buy-in. It gives them ownership of this is actually their project. Asking them to just copy and paste information onto a poster board, that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about application and deep dives into material. The third element is to activate and use 21st century competencies. There's some great websites, P21 and all kinds of other fantastic, just Google 21st century competencies and you get some great stuff. It really boils down to the 4 C's of critical thinking. Are they doing in-depth inquiry, which means are they asking questions? Are they looking up information? Are they making hypotheses and testing them? And are they finding out what they don't know? Creativity, again, generating new questions, putting unlike things together to create something brand new. And collaboration, working with other people, doesn't need to be necessarily in a digital world, but millennials really do like working with technology. I love it. You know, it makes it's so much easier. I'm sure even just participating from your desk today, it's a lot easier to do that than to come into the office. And to communicate with each other, both during the process, through the process, and also the final product needs to be something that communicates the information to the reader or the viewer or the audience. And I think part of that is the collaboration and the critical thinking, you know, reflection is a huge piece of that as well. Throughout it, they need to be monitoring their own thinking, monitoring their own learning. And thanks, Dr. Enid. Yeah, it's all part of andragogy too. We're not talking about children here. We're really talking about adults in higher education. You do find when you look on these websites, a lot of these things are geared towards elementary, middle, and high school, but the principles are the same. And it's a little bit ironic that higher education has to catch up to elementary school. So I think, you know, even just doing a doctorate, getting into research and everything, that is in depth, that is higher thinking. We need to realize that freshmen, you know, undergraduates are able to do the same kind of thinking. The fourth element is critique and revision. I like this picture of the coach talking to the guys on the football team, because what happens in sports is you don't expect to win every single time. A coach doesn't want the players to win and get it perfect every single time. It's not possible. You have to grow. You have to have new challenges. And with that comes failure, and there's always room for improvement. So why do we expect students to hand in a great, perfect version at the end of the semester without any coaching at all? We really need to give them a chance to monitor their process, to get meaningful feedback from their coach, which is their teacher, and also from each other, which helps them to think about their process and think about what they're doing. Find out, why isn't this working? Sometimes the mistakes that we make are the better lessons than just getting it right the first time. The fifth essential element is a public audience. This also ties into the why. If you're practicing music, you don't just practice it to play it for yourself. You practice it so that you can share it with other people. The final project in the band is to have a concert. So how about in our course, you know, how is our real world application going to apply to the rest of the world? Now, sometimes you're not going to apply, a lot of times you're not going to apply it to everybody, but you can certainly share it with the rest of the class. And in this case, we're sharing our process with all of you. So it does add meaning to it to have a broader audience that it's not just the instructor who's going to see the final project. Okay, do we have anything that we want to jump into before we start with our examples? No, we're good?
Oh, I do have one comment,
Yeah.
right? So you, there's no argument to what you're saying. It's what you're saying is sound, it's evidence-based, and we know it's really good, right? I'm always concerned, I know you're going to address this, but it's sort of like the elephant in the room when we say the time factor here. You know, I have a lot of students. I want them to be engaged. I want them to have these wonderful experiences, but there's only so much time.
Right.
Right. And we know that that's a factor.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. That's why we need to get down to at the very beginning of the course, at the beginning of the design of this, you really want to address what is it that I want my students to learn? What is the most important, crucial thing? Because you're going to have to give up some of your, if you normally spend 3 hours of lecture, you're probably going to have to give up some of that to give students the time to do what they need to do. And it's a real paradigm shift for a lot of people. And I do have some tips at the end of how to do that. We did have a question, where did we get the list? The list came from this pblworks.org. It came from their article, 8 Essentials of Project-Based Learning. And I'll share those resources with you when we're done. I didn't take exactly theirs because I didn't want to plagiarize it, and I needed to make it a little bit faster too. So this one is from, the first one I want to show you, sorry, as we're looking at these examples, I would like you to keep those 5 elements in mind. Do they have a strong why? Do the students have choice and voice? Are they using 21st century competencies? Do they have opportunity for critique and revision? And does their product get displayed to a larger audience, not just the instructor? So this came to me through Dr. John Sullivan. We started his e-design process in January of 2018. And of course, in February 2018, the Parkland shooting happened. And FAU is a feeder school for that high school. And so Dr. Sullivan he was on the governor's board of advisors for how can we keep this, what can we learn from this? How can we keep this from happening anymore? And Dr. Sullivan was really burdened with the idea of people who are studying criminal justice at our school, this is something that they're going to have to deal with in the field. So he wanted to use it as an opportunity to teach them real world skills. And I've just been I was so privileged to be part of it. Let me show you from the assignments tab on his Canvas course what this looks like a little bit. I'll give you some background information. He had at least 70, 85 students in the course. This is a 4,000 level course, so seniors. It's a course in studying violence. So what we did was we had discussions each week, but we broke it down into small groups of students, about 10 students who would work together each week in the semester. So when you're talking about violent crimes, these are sensitive subjects, and you don't want students to have to do discussions with an audience of 85 classmates. We broke them down into 10 groups of 10 so that they would have a safe environment in which to discuss these issues from week to week. Then at the midterm, we switched it up. And so the students had new groups to work with. We put them in groups of 6. It wasn't the same people, it was different people, but they were working with the same 6 people for the rest of the semester. Here's what the final project page looks like. It gives the students an overview. For the purpose of the project, you are a group of law enforcement mid-level managers. So they're playing a role. You must investigate a given school violence incident Then present your findings at a formal briefing of elected officials. And he gives them the specifics of what they're supposed to do. This tripartite approach, that was a key concept that they were learning. They're examining patterns of violence. They're attempting to understand violence based on those observed patterns, because in the textbook that they've been building, they've been understanding these patterns of violence and everything. Number 3 was to explore solutions or interventions to specific types of violence that are consistent with both observed patterns and explanations. And then pairs of the students in the group would take the perspective of each of the following 3 areas as a way to execute the examination of these patterns: criminological issues, criminal justice, and public health. So this is complex. This is not, you and I are not necessarily going to understand it right away. I know Dr. Enid will, because she's in the criminal justice field. The rest of us, it might take a couple of minutes, but that's appropriate because this is their final project of this whole class. Number 3, they're planning to submit their findings at a dress rehearsal to command staff, which is what you would actually do if you were in this field, before giving the actual briefing to the elected officials, which would be the instructor. The command staff would provide feedback on this dress rehearsal. Their job was to ask questions that elected officials might be expected to ask at a formal briefing. And then the project group would revise the presentation and the briefing documents based on the feedback. And then the final thing, they would submit the whole project to this final discussion board. And here's the rubric for the final project. They get the rubric, they get the instructions, they get everything right up front. There's no secrets, okay? Everybody needs to know precisely what's expected right from the beginning. Okay. Their groups, Dr. Sullivan broke them down into groups and gave them actual violent incidents that had occurred, and they needed to use the documents that were public record about these incidents. So the first week they had to do an outline. He gave them exactly what they're supposed to do. He gave them information about the Canvas group space, how to do it, how to work in a project group, how to share resources, how to do a team charter, how to get your questions answered. We did all of that because we don't want students confused in the online course. And of course, there's a rubric that goes along with that outline task. So every single step of the way, they've got how to do it, how you're being evaluated, how to get your questions answered, and exactly what to expect. Really setting the students up for success. That's a super, super important part. Now here's a discussion that is just for, it's in a small group. So each group is named after the incident that they're working on. And the discussion is just for that group, that they're let's see, what is the task here? They're working on the research for their project. So they're sharing their research with each other, sharing the whole process. Yep. Dr. Enid was just saying how the instructions for the group are really important. I completely agree. And then the last part of this task, let's see, is their second to last, they're doing their briefing dress rehearsal, which is a real life thing. That's what they would do if they actually were in, thanks, Lori, in the field. And that's how they're going to be evaluated. And their discussion has a rubric just for the dress rehearsal that they're supposed to be asking questions and how that's going to be evaluated. Then they have another week to revise it, polish it, and then submit their final thing. And of course, students also have an opportunity to share their reflection on working together, what it's like what their experience was like to work together, um, to give feedback on it. And a project like this really won't work unless everybody's on board. But he did explain um, how to do that. And by the time they had worked together on this project, they'd already been working in small groups with each other for a whole semester. So, did anybody want to give any feedback on that particular? I can't see it. No, just tell me what she said.
So Lori says, Lori Rebar is saying, this has not only helped us function as a group, but also realized that our instructor was aware of how we had to work within the space.
Thanks. And yeah, the instructors, we let them know that your instructor can see. Not every instructor wants to monitor that small group space in Canvas, but I think it is helpful to do that and let them know that you are monitoring and watching, just like the coach. It's really not fair to be the coach in the game, at the game and going, "Hey, why aren't you winning?" Well, you didn't come to practice. The coach needs to be there right alongside the students. It is a buy-in from everybody. And I would say too that an instructor needs to be the instructor really has a crucial part. You've got to be invested in this. You've got to care as much or more than your students do because you're the leader. That's the way they want to see your example. They want to see that you care. If you care, that's going to really help them to buy in and care. Okay. The next one that I want to share is from Dr. Doreen Jameson. She did Introduction to Volunteer Management. And this, again, is a 4,000 level course. It's seniors. And she had the students develop a professional style portfolio in response to a job at an advertisement for a volunteer manager. And she broke the whole course down. I like the way we did, I developed this after I did Dr. Sullivan's, and I like the way this one's broken down because it tells you tells the students what the tasks are and how they relate specifically to this final project. And it gives them exactly what it is that they're going to do throughout. And this is not a group project. This is an individual's project. Okay. Up here, we've got a tab for more information, what the final portfolio should have in it. Okay. And the rubric that goes along with the actual final portfolio. And then here we've got resources that the students needed for doing their different pieces. Throughout the project, let's see, they do have a reflection journal. This I really like. Dr. Judy designed this particular journal template. Very nice. So it looks like a journal, and it's a document that they download and keep, and they'll upload to different parts for grading throughout the course. But we know that reflection is an important part of learning. And let's see, going back. Thanks, Lisa just said that it's very organized. I think it really is important to lay it all out. And that's where Blueprint, it's very lesson planning. We all know as teachers, you either, what is it? Plan to fail, or if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? And then here we do have using peer review to show each other their work. So, and then the final portfolio is an actual, this is going to go into the students, resume. They're going to be using it if they want to do the work of a volunteer manager. They can actually have something to share with a potential boss. Okay. There are more, but I knew we would be limited on time today. So did anybody want to share or talk at this point?
Well, I hate to keep like jumping in, and I don't
No,
mean,
I would appreciate it, please.
I want it, from a teacher perspective, so looking at this with fresh eyes. For me, what it communicates the most is that when something is not, when students are not doing well in one particular part, then when I'm working in this organized way, I'm more apt to discover earlier rather than later the why behind the struggle.
Exactly.
Because it's so tightly aligned. You have all the pieces in place. Students from the very beginning know exactly what they're going to be working on. Everything is relevant. Everything has a purpose.
Mhm.
You can really be there in the moment with the students, help them to learn to self-assess as they go along, and then you're more apt and they're more apt to have a successful outcome.
I agree. And I think it makes it kind of exciting to be a teacher who's involved in a process like that.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed. Agreed.
thanks. Did anybody else want to share?
It's Lori Rebar. She has something to say here. As a librarian, I tell students in instructional sessions that they are part of the academic conversation. Being peer reviewers, working in groups, and having a final presentation. These are ways that they can see that they are actually part of the scholarly conversation. What they have researched is presented and becomes part of the scholarly conversation.
For sure. And actually, in Dr. Sullivan, thank you. Thank you so much, Lori. It's so true. I've had more than one professor who uses the research of the students to add to the data of the, I don't even know what you call it, but these research projects that make a difference in our world. I mean, Dr. Sullivan actually took the data that he discovered from the students, brought it to the governor. I mean, that's and it will impact, it does impact how schools are addressing this particular issue. So it's wonderful, so exciting to me. Um, okay, so then we get to the, okay, if you haven't left screaming into the night, going, it's too much, I can't do it. The first, we want to break it down into a how-to, and I'm going to share these resources, the Palm Beach, not Palm Beach, project-based learning.org as well. But it kind of doesn't have to be too complicated. You start with what you can do, and then as the process grows, you break it down semester after semester and refine. The first thing you want to do is start with the standards and your objectives. What is it that I really want my students to learn or to be able to do? Um, think back to 7th grade home ec class, if you were lucky enough to have that. I'll never forget the hamburger pillow that we made in 7th grade home ec class. We learned how to sew in that class. We had to get our stuff and we just made a hamburger pillow. It was great. So what is it that I want my students to really be able to do? Then we're going to break it down, scaffolding the tasks. What checkpoints do I need to best facilitate success? Where is it that I need to students check in? Maybe outline point, maybe research point, maybe draft, um, and I also recommend if you're doing it online, give them an opportunity to meet with you at some point virtually that they can discuss it with you and ask you any face-to-face questions that they need to. Think about what explicit teaching is required at each point. Do they know how to do what it is that you're asking them to do? Hopefully they don't, because that's what they're here to do, is to learn, right? We want to bring them to the next level. And then how am I going to measure success? Backwards design tells us write your assessments first, write your rubrics first, then it's very easy to put the course together because I can see what it is I need my students to have in order to be successful. The third part is we want to make sure that we facilitate structured learner-to-learner interaction. We can't just say, here's a discussion board, post your questions up there, and we'll answer them as we go along. I mean, that's part of it, but you really want to give, if you're putting two strangers in a room together and they're supposed to work on something, just like any other organized meeting, what's the agenda? How do we know that we've been successful? And what are the rules? How do we do that? Adults need it, I do. If we're having a meeting, I want to know what time should I get there? What are we going to talk about? What am I supposed to bring in order to be successful? And how do I know that I did a good job? Students, they're just people, they need the same. And then we need to include reflection points about the process, giving students an opportunity to think about what they learned, what mistakes they made, what would they do differently, and even offering suggestions about how to improve the process. How did you like this assignment? What could we have built in to make it easier for you? And then use that advice next semester. We always make it a little bit better. The benefits again of project-based learning, I would say it's just from my experience, but research bears it out too. Increased engagement provides rigor, higher levels of learning, increased student success, and it really is more fun to be a teacher of a class like this. It's more engaging and more fulfilling for teachers and for students. Challenges, as we've said, it takes time. It's not going to be a one and done thing. We always are improving the process as we go along. I would recommend, as an instructor, also keep a reflection journal. What's happening? What are the students struggling with? What can I improve next semester? And trying something new is always challenging. Might not work. Dr. Sullivan's course, the first semester it ran, we had one group mixed up with another. The first semester it was so confused because we pressed the wrong button at the beginning of the semester. But Dr. Sullivan was super cool about it. He said, well, we'll know next semester how to do it right. And it's running great now. So, we don't want to be afraid of making mistakes. We want to be bold and move forward. Sure.
Okay. Lori Rebar says, as a student, I have appreciated when the instructor has a general discussion board for asking questions that come up generally in the class or questions about specific instructions or activities.
Absolutely. And that is a staple of all of our online courses. You really need to have that tool. The point that I was making was that I've met instructors who that's the only learner-to-learner interaction that they have. And we need to do more than just that. Certainly giving students a chance to post your questions, give them an opportunity. Dr. Judy says, don't answer them right away. Let the other students interact with that, because once the instructor comes in and answers the question, the discussion kind of shuts down because that's clearly the right answer. But yeah, we definitely need to have both. Yes.
Go ahead, Bernadette.
Yeah, hi. I don't know if you're able to hear me. I'm actually in Asheville and the reception can kind of come and go. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, hi.
Yes.
I'm actually retired faculty, but I am teaching, as we all know, a few courses here and there. I just wanted to make two suggestions from doing these projects with nursing students. I have found that randomly assigning students in each learning module to small groups, maybe 4 or 5 students, then gives them the opportunity to really see and appreciate everyone else's work. And I also found that for each one of the steps of the project, as far as the instructions, I use Screencast-O-Matic, and I try not to drone and go through the instructions. And overwhelmingly, students will always say at the end of the course, that was a lifesaver to hear your voice, Dr. Lang. So I just offer that as two suggestions.
Thank you. Absolutely. giving them opportunities to interact with more than just one small group of students, very, very helpful. And also seeing a demonstration of especially technical things that you really do need to see the instructor model how to do that. Super helpful. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. And this is from Laurie Rebar. Yes, a lot of times the other students will answer each other's questions. That helps other students feel comfortable in asking additional questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we really, research definitely bears out that when students speak to each other about the problem solving, about the content, uh, they remember it. It's terrific. Thank you so much. The other thing I want you to remember is that you're not alone. Okay, the two examples that I showed you are very in depth. Those are models. I could show you a bunch of other projects that just have one thing, or two things. It's not super complicated, but it really matters that it should fit what you're comfortable with. And Larmer and Morgendoller also said that it really needs to fit into what the instructor feels comfortable doing. Come to us. That we love helping with stuff like that. If you just I have this thing that I want them to accomplish, but I don't know how. We love to brainstorm. We've got a whole team here that would love to help work on that. And we've got a virtual community of practice. Everybody who's on chat here, this is a great place to come and say, hey, I've got this idea and I'm not really sure how to implement that. That really lights our fire. We're excited with that. I'm also going to send to you a document with resources and ways that you can connect with other people. Before we leave, I'm really excited to announce that nominations are now being taken for the 2020 FAU Excellence in E-Learning Awards. And Dr. Shahada is with us. She was one of the very first winners. She won the Adjunct Faculty Award in, I forget what year it was, 2016, I think. This is our sixth year of doing it. I can't remember. I'm terrible at numbers. Fourth year. Thanks, Lynette. And it's a great way to honor really excellent online instructors and leaders at FAU. So I'll share the link with you also for everything that's involved in that. And we're going to do celebration of the winners at the 2020 Teaching with Technology Showcase, which will be in April in Jupiter this year. Really want to thank you for your time. Your time is the most valuable thing that you have, and we're so happy and excited that you shared it with us. I believe this is the last PD webinar for the semester. So if we don't speak to you before the new year, we hope you have a great, wonderful holiday, safe and joyful, and that you return again in 2020 healthy and happy and ready for a new year. Thanks so much.